Lowenthal, Maldonado, Negrete McLeod, Oropesa, Padilla, Pavley, Price, Romero, Runner, Semidian, Steinberg, Strickland, Walters, Wiggins, Wolk, Wright, Weiland, Yee.
Members, a quorum is present. Would the members and guests beyond the rail in the gallery please rise? We will be led in prayer this morning by our guest chaplain, Reverend Stephen Gilbert, after which please remain standing. We'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by Senator Cogdell.
Good morning. Let's take a moment before settling into the work at hand to reflect on what has called you to your work in government, to reflect on what has called you to assume the sacred trust of representing the people of this state, protecting their rights, liberties, and well-being. And I invite you to consider that in this calling to serve, you will follow the urging of God in the way of your own spiritual tradition, and that this power and presence is with you now. I know that God is everywhere present, living in us and through us, extending opportunity and compassion by our hands to the people we serve. I know that we also live and move and have our being in that great spirit, the life of our lives. And because of this, today, we have the strength, wisdom, humility to govern from the purity of our own hearts. I affirm the great resilience of our state, our people, and our leaders. The good we intend to accomplish through our work is already complete in the mind of God. And therefore, our work now is to continue to follow the guidance that brought us to this life of service. Thank you, God, for each citizen of this state. May their daily lives be uplifted today as we engage our work on their behalf. Thank you, God, for the rich beauty of this state. May we use its resources wisely so it is preserved for our posterity. Thank you, God, for the privilege of leading and serving and for guiding our hearts and actions. May we always remember the sacred trust we have been given. I release this prayer and know it is done, and so it is. Amen.
Members, we're on privileges of the floor. Does any member have an item? Senator Cox is recognized at his desk.
Mr. President, members, I rise today to adjourn in memory of George Sakopoulos of Carmichael, who passed away last week. George was one of the largest developers and landowners in Sacramento. George was born in Greece in 1927, came to America after the end of World War II with a mere $64 in his pocket. George got to start fixing up houses for resale and eventually became involved in landmark properties such as the Bank of the West Tower, the IMAX Theater, and Esquire Plaza. Those who knew George know that he cared deeply about his community and about his family, but he never forgot his humble beginnings. George leaves behind his wife, Drusilla, and 2 children. Mr. President, I ask that the Chamber adjourn in memory of George Sakopoulos.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Senator Romero is recognized at her desk.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. We have a very special guest with us on the Senate chamber floor today. He is the president of the Rio Hondo Community College District, Mr. Andre Quintero. If you could welcome him to the Senate today.
Welcome to the State Senate. Members, under motions and resolutions, without objection, we have amendments to desk will be adopted. Members, we're on consideration of the daily file, the second reading file. Will the clerk please read?
Assembly Bill 1406, Assembly Bill 473, Assembly Bill 58, Assembly Bill 121, Assembly Bill 123, Assembly Bill 140, Assembly Bill 232, Assembly Bill 247, Assembly Bill 252, Assembly Bill 269, Assembly Bill 297, Assembly Bill 388, Assembly Bill 403, Assembly Bill 412, Assembly Bill 430, Assembly Bill 608, Assembly Bill 714, Assembly Bill 753, Assembly Bill 763, Assembly Bill 870, Assembly Bill 1046, Assembly Bill 1270, Assembly Bill 1337, Assembly Bill 1490, Assembly Bill 1573, Assembly Bill 1574, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 15, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 24, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 36, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 48, Assembly Concurrent Resolution 60, Assembly Bill 322, Assembly Bill 1186, Assembly Bill 248 with amendments, Assembly Bill 175 with amendments, Assembly Bill 265, Assembly Bill 1191, Assembly Bill 769 with amendments, Assembly Bill 1393, Assembly Bill 50 with amendments, Assembly Bill 358.
The second reading file is deemed read.
Is it a simple majority vote? Waive the file notice, is it a simple majority vote? I don't know. You? Who knows? Who knows around here? Greg, is this a simple majority vote? Is there a simple majority vote?
Senator Hollingsworth recognizes his desk.
Requesting a Senate Republican caucus.
What does he want to? Senator Hollingsworth has requested a Republican caucus in the Minority Leader's office. Senator Steinberg is recognized.
No objection to the Republican caucus.
It's a good way to start, Senator.
We'll call a Democratic caucus in the Maddie Lounge. Okay?
Members, the pro tem is called the Democratic caucus in the Maddie Lounge. The Senate will be in caucus, be in recess. Darrell, are you ready? All right. Members, the Senate will reconvene now that the Republican and Democratic caucuses are over. I'd like to recognize Senator Duchesne at her desk.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A member, without objection, I'd like to suspend Joint Rule 10.5.
Members, Senator Duchesne would like to suspend Joint Rule 10.5. Will the Secretary please call the roll? Oh, Senator
I said
Amstad.
without objection. Are we going to object or not?
Any objection, Senator Amstad?
Mr. President, members, we do object to the suspension of this rule. We would ask for a no vote. At 10 o'clock this morning, we were handed this packet of 30 bills. Is the first time that the Republican senators got a chance to see this package, which includes nearly $10 billion in cuts and $13 billion in new revenue and accounting gimmicks, to not use a better word. A lot to digest in just 36 minutes. When Senator Hollingsworth became the leader, he informed the President Pro Tem that he would like to have a sunshine on all of the processes of this budget negotiation, not only just in the public conference committees, but also sunshine in the Big Five And we believe that suspending the 24-hour notice and also not having this go to a fiscal committee is in contradiction to the Republican position of having the public have input and having the public be able to react to this package of cuts and tax revenue. Therefore, we would oppose these motions.
Senator DeCheney.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would just point out for the record that the Republican staff has been getting all of this material at the same time that our staff has throughout the weekend. It has nothing that's in here was not something that Republican caucus staff did not participate in the formation of since the conference closed last week. That said, given that there is an objection, I would withdraw that motion and move to re-refer the measures to Budget and Fiscal Review Committee.
Members, first we are having a roll call on suspension of Joint Rule 10.5.
She's waiving that.
You're waiving that.
Okay. I'm withdrawing that motion and making a new motion to re-refer the bills to Budget Committee.
Okay. Members, in discussion on this debate, on this 21 vote threshold, will the Secretary please call the roll?
Onnested. Aye. Alquist. Aye. Ashburn. No. Benoit. Aye. Calderon. Cedillo. Aye. Cogdill. Calderon. Aye. Cedillo. Aye. Cogdill. Aye. Corbett. Aye. Correa. Aye. Cox. Aye. Denham. Aye. DeSaulnier. Aye. DeCheney. Aye. Dutton. Aye. Flores.
Aye.
Aye. Hancock. Aye. Harmon. Aye. Hollingsworth. Aye. Huff. Aye. Kehoe. Aye. Leno. Aye. Liu. Aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Maldonado. Aye. Negrete McLeod. Aye. Oropesa. Aye. Padilla. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Price. Aye. Romero. Aye. Runner. Aye. Semidian. Aye. Steinberg. Aye. Strickland. Aye. Walters. Aye. Wiggins. Aye. Wolk. Aye. Wright. Aye. Wyland. Aye. Yee. Yee, aye. Ashburn, no to aye.
Ayes 40, no 0. The motion is passed. We are now going to recess and reconvene as the Budget Subcommittee. Senator DeCheney is recognized. Budget Committee. Senator DeCheney is recognized.
Thank you very much. As the Budget Committee, now I would ask that the Budget Committee do pass as amended out of committee. We would take the same amendments that were at the desk. They're now in committee, adopt them in committee, and re-refer back to the floor.
Okay. Any debate or discussion on this, members? Seeing hearing none.
Requesting an aye vote.
Secretary, Senator DeCheney is asking for an aye vote. 21 vote threshold. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Onnested. No. Alquist. Aye. Ashburn. No. Benoit. No. Calderon. Aye. Cedillo. Cogdill. No. Corbett. Aye. Correa. Aye. Cox. No. Denham. No. DeSaulnier. DeCheney.
Aye.
Aye. Dutton. No. Flores. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Harmon. No. Hollingsworth. No. Huff. No. Kehoe.
Aye.
Aye. Leno. Aye. Liu. Aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Maldonado. No. Negrete McLeod. Aye. Oropesa. Aye. Padilla. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Price. Aye. Romero. Aye. Runner. No. Semidian. Aye. Steinberg. Aye. Strickland. No. Walters. No. Wiggins. Aye. Wolk. Aye. Wright. Aye. Wyland. No. Yee. Yee, aye. DeSaulnier, aye. Cedillo, aye. Mr. President.
Ayes 25, noes 15. The measure passed. Senator DeCheney.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would now ask, now that, see, we've referred it to the floor already, so I just need to suspend Senate Rule 29.3 to take up the measure in mock-up form.
That's 21 votes.
Members, is a 21 vote threshold. Any debate or discussion? Seeing, hearing none, would Secretary please call the roll?
Onnested? No. Alquist? Aye. Ashburn? No. Benoit? No. Calderon? Aye. Cedillo? Aye. Cogdill? No. Corbett? Aye. Correa? Aye. Cox? No. Denham? No. DeSaulnier? Aye. DeCheney? Aye. Dutton? No. Flores?
Aye.
Aye. Hancock? Aye. Harmon? No. Hollingsworth? No. Huff? No. Kehoe? Aye. Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Maldonado? No. Negrete McLeod? Aye. Oropesa? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Price? Aye. Romero? Aye. Runner? No. Simidian? Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? Walters? No. Wiggins? Aye. Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? No. Yee? Yee, aye. Strickland, no. Mr. President, ayes 25, noes 15.
Ayes 25, noes 15. The measure is passed. Members, the bill is now before us. AB 180. Senator Steinberg is recognized at his desk. Secretary, please read the bill.
Please read the bill.
Assembly Bill 180 by the Assembly Committee on Budget, an act relating to the state budget and making an appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Senator Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and members. Before we begin the debate in which we talk about some of our differences, I guess I want to take a point of personal privilege to tell all the members of this body that I'm proud of the work that you have done and we have done together during these most difficult times. I know it is easy and pretty easy sport to bash this institution, criticize it, and certainly there is much that needs to be improved on here. But I just want to say, as your leader, that we dealt with $36 billion of a budget deficit in February, and as we debate what the correct number is or isn't here, we will resolve the next chapter of this, and we will do so timely. I love this institution, and I think it's time that as we argue and as we debate, which we will and we must, it's an important part of the process, that we take rightful pride in the fact that we have avoided an economic catastrophe here in California in the midst of a nearly $60 billion budget deficit. So I want to begin the discussion and the debate in that spirit. Members, this morning we present the conference report, or part of the conference report, I should say, specifically Assembly Bill 180, which is the only bill up for decision here this morning. It is an $11 billion cut bill. It cuts across the board: education, health care, human services, corrections, and transportation. And members, I probably don't need to remind all of you that these $11 billion of cuts are in fact on top of the $15.4 billion of cuts we made in February and the $11.4 billion of cuts we made back in September of 2008. You do the math, over the past 9 months, if you include our proposal here today, this legislature and the governor will have cut $37 billion from this state budget and in all areas. Remember that in September, we cut $4.6 billion out of K-12, K-14 education. In February, we cut $8.4 billion from education. In September, we cut $1.4 billion from Health and Human Services. In February, we cut $1.7. In February, we cut $1.2 from state employees. In September 2008, we cut $900 from state employees. And the list goes on and on. When you look at the spending level that the conference report and this bill specifically suggests, we have cut back spending to the 2005 level. Now, we can agree, disagree whether that's a good thing, bad thing, certainly for Democrats. The decisions that we've been called upon to make, and not just Democrats, the decisions that you as Republicans have been called upon to make to cut back in these vital areas have been painful, but they have been necessary in order to deal with the fact that, as the governor said, we simply have less money. We simply have less money, and the tax receipts are not coming in as we would all like. Our entire conference report, which again is not the subject of this particular bill, but our entire conference report gets us to this magical $24 billion number that has been spoken widely about over the last several weeks. But while our report, and specifically the cut package that is before you, reports cuts in every area, it maintains hope and it maintains a heart. Here is what we are fighting for, members. Just a second. We are fighting to keep health insurance for 950,000 kids, and our conference report largely maintains that commitment. It's not only the right and moral thing to do, but it's frankly good fiscal policy, because you all know where those 950,000 kids will end up if we accede to the elimination of the Healthy Families Program. They will end up, of course, in emergency rooms, costing the taxpayers a whole lot more money. We are fighting to keep 600,000 poor, out-of-work Californians on the road towards full employment. Talk about economic stimulus or economic development. The impact of kicking 600,000 people off that path will only do greater damage to our economy, much less the people themselves. We are fighting to keep 100,000 young people in California eligible for college scholarships. Now, how many of you members on both sides of the aisle have given speeches in your district or on this floor about the importance of a college education? It's as basic as apple pie. And yet we know that thousands of middle-income and low-income students cannot avail themselves of that opportunity unless we provide the scholarship that gets them at least part of the way there. And we are fighting to keep 400,000 elderly and disabled Californians out of nursing homes by providing the kind of in-home care that is not only more decent, not only maintains the dignity of the people, but is also much more cost-effective. And we are also, frankly, fighting for our colleagues who serve in local government. We don't believe that it is a good thing to take $1.9 billion from local government for two reasons. Number one, they're hurting as much as we're hurting. And number two, it is that word that you and we all decry consistently. It's borrowing. It has to be paid back with interest within 3 years. What we maintain in this conference report is the safety net for the most vulnerable Californians and the investments that only help people become a productive part of our economy and of our state. And I want to make our position very clear. We don't sign pledges on our side of the aisle, but what I am about to say is just as clear and just as strong. We will not eliminate the Healthy Families Program. We will not eliminate CalWORKs. We will not eliminate in-home care. And we will not eliminate CalWORKs. It's not going to happen. And if that is the price for garnering your votes for a budget, respectfully, forget about it. It's not going to happen. We know, members, the following. The clock is ticking. We are acting today to keep the DMV, the state prisons, and the schools open. And we're also acting to avoid IOUs, which the state controller is going to announce within a few minutes, as I understand it, will occur July 1st if we don't make a real dent in this problem. We also know that we will lose more than $3 billion in education cuts alone if we do not act by June the 30th. Over $3 billion in education cuts. And so I want to begin this debate, members, by posing the following questions to the members who are reluctant or unwilling to vote for the cuts. Remember, the cuts that are before you in Assembly Bill 180. Republican conferees over the 3-week, very public and transparent conference committee process rejected more than $6 billion of the governor's non-tax proposals. Over $6 billion of them. Your caucus has also spoken against Proposition 1A, or taking money from local governments pursuant to Proposition 1A. And so the question I want to pose here today is, do you have a $24 billion plan? And given the July 1st deadline, will you present it, and when? Will you have 15 votes for your $24 billion plan? The second question that I want to pose for purposes of a civil debate here today is, why won't you cut? Why won't you cut? And I ask that question given the following history. I've talked to a couple of members, and I intend this to be only constructive and only civil. In January, after the minority party rejected the Democratic majority vote tax plan, seems like a long, long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago, Senator Strickland was quoted in the Ventura County Star in the following way. First of all, the story says, Senator Strickland proposes instead that lawmakers immediately adopt $7 billion in mid-year spending cuts that Democrats, Republicans, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger have already agreed to, and then go back to the negotiating table to talk about how to solve the other 83% of the state's fiscal crisis. And then Senator Strickland was quoted, "It gets us $7 billion closer to meeting our obligations. There's no arguing that it gets us closer." Senator Onnested put out a statement on January the 15th after the dust-up over the majority vote taxes, in which he said, quote, "We've already adopted nearly $10 billion worth of cuts in the Senate. It never did reach the governor's desk, and I find that frustrating. These are cuts that both sides have already agreed to and would ensure that the state of California does not run out of cash next month." Senator Cogdill, January 7th, 2009. "While we continue to work on solving the entire budget problem, there is no reason to delay the parts of the budget where the legislature has found consensus. We should start by immediately enacting the $6 billion in budget solutions that have already been agreed upon by both Republicans and Democrats. That would be a responsible first step to avert the looming cash crisis and put Californians back to work." Senator Tom Harmon, the first order of business, January 15th. "The first order of business should be to adopt the $6 billion in spending reductions already agreed upon by Republicans and Democrats to bring immediate revenue to the state's coffers." Now, AB 180 contains nearly $11 billion worth of real cuts. If cutting where we have consensus was good enough in January, why isn't it good enough in June, as we are a week away from IOUs and a potential fiscal meltdown? Yesterday, in conclusion, a reporter asked me if this is a game of chicken. And the well-meaning question implies that this is, in fact, a game. But you know what? A game is fun. I'll enjoy playing games. This is not a game. This is deadly serious. Because when we tell you, without hesitation, that we are not going to eliminate the safety net for people, it is, in many cases, a matter of life and death. So this is serious. And you can get up and, call it a drill. I call it debate. And I call it framing our differences in a civil way. But you need to know where we stand. And you need to know where we are not going to go. Remember one last thing. We passed a budget in February. This is a budget revision. It is a budget revision. And it is our responsibility to get as much as we can, as much as we can agree upon, and our overall number is high with the taxes and even without the taxes. It's our responsibility to get billions of dollars in solutions to the administration, to the governor, well before July 1st. And that's what we intend to do. I urge an aye vote.
Senator Hollingsworth is recognized at the desk.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the state's budget currently stands $24 billion in deficit. The state's treasury is rapidly running out of cash. Everyone knows this. The governor knows it. Each Republican caucus has said it. The Democrat controller knows it. The Democrat treasurer knows it. The public knows that this is a $24 billion deficit, and we have to solve a $24 billion problem. Now, it's my understanding today that you've removed the $2.3 billion tax increase and the billions of dollars of accounting shifts and other questionable practices, and that today we are voting on an $11 billion solution to a $24 billion problem. This is not only partial and incomplete, but because it is those two things, it is not a solution. Now let's talk a little bit about the history of the last couple of weeks, even the last 6 months. The Republican conferees voted against billions of dollars of fund shifts and gimmicks, but they also voted for $7 billion more in spending reductions and cuts that would be necessary to fix this problem that the majority party rejected. Republicans talked about taking this piecemeal. You are correct on the majority side to say that. That was in January when we had 6 months to work on this one piece at a time. Today we have 8 days. This is not a solution. We share the governor's concern, we share the controller's concern, and the treasurer's concern. We would like not to have to fix this entire problem all at once, but we cannot risk that. And we cannot wait. We have 8 days before the state's checks are no good and we have to issue IOUs. We have 8 days before we run out of borrowing capacity. We have 8 days before our credit rating is seriously downgraded. We have to get serious and solve the problem. Let's get that done, and let's get that done now.
Senator Amistad.
Mr. President, members, I wasn't intending to get up to speak until I heard my name mentioned a few minutes ago. Perhaps I can answer your question as to why I was willing to vote for $10 billion in cuts last Thanksgiving time. And that's because, let me give you an analogy. At that time, the tumor was small. We could have done it last Thanksgiving time, a half a year ago, with that amount of cuts. However, the news has gotten worse every week since we've been here since Thanksgiving, to the point where now voting on $10 or $11 billion in cuts is akin to removing half of the cancer. That doesn't do the patient any good. In fact, it spreads the cancer. You don't do surgery on cancer and just remove half of it. Let's take care of the problem. Let's do surgery the way it should be done and get this done all at once the way it should be done, correct this problem so that for once in the 12 years that I've been in this legislature, we can actually have a balanced budget.
Senator Denham.
Mr. President, members, I would agree that this is partial and incomplete, but I felt compelled to get up for one reason. The difference between the cuts in January and February versus the cuts now, you say that eliminating CalWORKs and some of these cuts is like eliminating a safety net, life and death. Well, for me, and I've got to imagine many members on this floor, getting an early release is an issue of life and death. human trafficking and some of the many different issues that are in early release have huge consequences in our districts. When we've already seen local government cut law enforcement, when we have less cops on the street today, when we have our jails overcrowding and judges releasing people to let some of the worst out early with less parole or any parole, less cops, that is an issue of life and death.
Okay. Members, any debate or discussion? Senator Leno is recognized at his desk.
Our colleague, the good doctor, appropriately uses the analogy of surgery. I'm not a physician. Potentially, I'm an adventurer, so I'm going to use a different analogy. We have a proposal before us that takes us down a path. We have to find our way home. At the end of that path is a $24 billion solution. Our conference report has a $24 billion solution. We have shown you our path. Today, we're taking the first steps, $11 billion worth of steps down that path. We're just asking you to join us. We can do this with simple majority vote, but at a cost, and at a cost to the state of California, a significant cost, because we will lose 90 days worth of savings without Republican support. Majority vote doesn't get us there. But the analogy of the path is, let's go $11 billion down that path. You know our rest of the way. You may not agree with it. But the minority leader says we have 8 days. We have 8 days. We have to get serious about our problem. So please show us your way home. How do you get us from 11 to 24? We've shown you how we would do it. Where is your plan, Mr. Minority Leader? We have 8 days. We have to get serious about the problem. We're open to other suggestions. You have not shown us how you get there. We've told you what we can't do. We know from any number of studies that by 2020, all new jobs in California, 40% of them will require a college degree. With the status quo in place, only 31% of Californians will have a college degree. That will not serve the state well. If we were to eliminate the Cal Grants program, that number would drop precipitously, potentially as low as 25%, going in exactly the wrong direction. If you have another plan as to how we're going to sustain 31% of Californians with a college education, if not get us closer to the 40% that will be necessary, please show us. But the idea that you would not join us through $11 billion worth of pure cut solution today is truly confounding. And to compound that confound, you've got nothing before us that would suggest how you get to $24 billion. We've shown you ours. Please show us yours.
Senator Lowenthal.
Members, I was fortunate enough, maybe not fortunate, but certainly was part of the conference committee. And one of the things that I was struck with is when I joined the conference committee was a statement that was made by one of my Republican colleagues from the Assembly who was on the conference committee, and it was Assembly Member Nielsen, who had been here before term limits, who spoke to us about a time when people were not Republicans or Democrats necessarily, but spoke to each other rather than at each other, tried to work out negotiated compromises. And he spoke to us about how disappointed he was when he came back and he had a budget that we dealt with as a new member in February that really he just saw for the first time. And he complimented us on the process that we were going through. And he asked us to find those parts of the budget where there was consensus, and let's do this in stages. This was not done last February, but really in the last couple of weeks. Members, we have an opportunity to demonstrate to Californians, not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but that this is where we have consensus. And we will continue to work on the more difficult parts of the problem. Members, we cannot not vote for things that we agree upon that reduce our deficit. I urge you to talk to each other, not with speeches at each other, and come to the understanding that these are reasonable and responsible cuts, and we as Californians must act responsibly. I urge and I vote.
Thank you, Senator Lowenthal. Members, any more debate or discussion on this item? Senator Ducheney, you're recognized, and I'm going to recognize Senator Steinberg right after you.
Thank you very much, members. Let me just straighten out a couple of the misconceptions that I think are floating here. This is a $24 billion package, and it does have that much in solutions. It would require the 20 trailer bills that go with this bill. But members, unless this bill is passed, the trailer bills are sort of, why would we take up the trailer bills? So it is a $24 billion solution that is presented today. It is not just this bill. But the point is, this is the base that does the revisions to the 9-10 budget. There are additional trailer bills that do things to the 08-09 budget that are assumed in this bill. This bill assumes certain revenues, assumes some of the things that Senator Hollingsworth referred to, the deferrals, the shifts, all of those kinds of things, the governor's proposals. I would remind members that this bill and the package that goes with it is nearly 50% of the governor's proposals that were made during the 3 different May revisions that we received. One or the other of those 3 May revisions, about 50% of the bill reflects that. Many of those actions and many others, frankly, that are contained in here were in fact voted on by Republican conferees. This was not a completely one-sided affair. If any of you bothered to watch the hours and hours of television entertainment that we provided over the 2 or 3 weeks, both with the public testimony and in the debates, much of this product is a consensus product. There are a few key places where it diverged. Senator Steinberg pointed some of them out, and the key to the $7 billion, I'll just assume Senator Hollingsworth's number's accurate, the $7 billion in cuts that Democrats refused to vote for would have, I believe, done more damage to this economy than anything we could possibly think of in terms of eliminating loopholes and tax credits and even the oil extraction tax and some of the other things that are assumed to be part of this package. It would, by some accounts, probably increase our unemployment by at least 2% within the next year. And members, let's remember how we got here from last year. There have been several proposals over the last year that would have had us in balance. Last May, the conference committee proposed a variety of things, some including portions of parole reform and such that would have saved us over $500 million during the last year and would have led to more savings in the budget year had they been passed last May when Senator Machado and I proposed them. We proposed that people at that time, that as Governor Regan had done and as Governor Wilson had done in the past, that perhaps folks who made more than $500,000 a year could pay a little more to try to help keep the state afloat during that time. And a lot of that was before, we did a budget in September, and before the ink was dry, Wall Street collapsed. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, everybody collapsed. The credit market went crazy. All of the things we sort of thought might work to get us through the housing slump that we thought we were into, happened, the week after we did one budget solution last September. Members, in 4 months, we've never seen anything like this before. In the 4 months from September to January, our unemployment rate went up 2%. That was unprecedented. And even during that time, because we knew after the Wall Street crashed and the world and the global economy and the national economy went south, that we needed to do some things to help keep the current year budget in balance. We made proposals that would have worked, Senator Onestad, in November. But that included, if you wanted to make it stable, reinstating the vehicle license fee that people paid for 50 years without complaining at a period when things worked a little better. It included, in December, when that proposal was rejected, we came up with a different way of doing it that did not require 2/3 vote, and that proposal could have worked for the 08-9. We ended up where we were in February, and having, by virtue, and I have to say this, the governor and the Republicans proposed all of the things that were on the ballot, except 1B, which was essentially a corollary to 1A. Those were concessions to trying to find different ways out of the puzzle than to be honest about the need for revenues and the balance of cuts and revenues. People accepted an enormous number of cuts, and most of the programs that we're talking about, whether it's education, health and human services, and even corrections, now we're finally getting to some reductions in the corrections budget that are substantial and I think important. They are contained in here. The reductions are in here. The trailer bills that make some of that work are, in fact, the other pieces of legislation. But we present this today, members, not as a half a solution, but as the centerpiece of the full solution, because anything we do differently than what is in here would require a whole different set of trailer bills. But what we are not prepared to do, members, is to say to 1 million children who have no health insurance, just as your parents are becoming unemployed and losing their health insurance. What we are not prepared to do is to say to single mothers with children, you are homeless today. 450,000 people who yesterday received job services, who get child care services to help them be able to go to work in CalWorks, that they are not only without funds to pay their rent, but they're now unemployed because they don't have those job services, they don't have that child care, and gosh, what happens to the child care provider and the resources that those folks use? We are not prepared to say to 90%, as the governor suggested, of the in-home supportive services recipients that they no longer have support, even though they are eligible technically for Medi-Cal and could go to a nursing home and cost us 10 times what it costs to send somebody to their home every day. We are not prepared to say 90%, but what we have said in this budget is everybody and everything that the state funds receives a reduction. Our courts would close for 1 day a month. We have found ways through their reserves and such to try to keep them to where they are. It says, we will try to put our parks on a different system, and if we would each pay $15 for each of our cars, we could keep all of our 270 parks open, not only this year, but into the future, without having to have them every year subject to this general fund fight. $15 per car, members, and everybody can have free access to the use of our parks, and we can protect all of that land with our park rangers. It says, the governor's proposal, that we ought to perhaps pay a little bit on our insurance to help maintain our fire and emergency services. There are a variety of different solutions contained within this, but on the most part, for all of those programs, makes reductions. It does make a reduction in the home supportive services of over $100 million, but we don't believe endangers lives directly because it protects the vast majority of those services. Folks with AIDS will take a reduction in those services, but not to the level that secedes, that gives away $128 million in federal funds from the Wyatt White Act. Not in a way that destroys the economy. We reduce healthy families by $70 million, and hopefully Senator Cox can prevail on the First Five Commission to help make that up and keep some of our folks on healthy families. There is opportunities here for Prop 63 and Prop 1A and Prop 10 to actually provide some support for some of the programs that are being cut. But all of the programs, including our schools, including our universities, including all of that are cut. And the other thing we tried to do, members, with this package is leverage federal funds to the extent we could. To give up billions and billions of dollars of federal funds by refusing to match any of it at this point in time, in this kind of economy, when Californians, we're struggling to get people back to work. We are starting to put people back to work with our construction contracts on freeways, with our construction contracts for water projects. We're using the federal stimulus dollars. We have Workforce Investment Act dollars on the streets now. We have weatherization projects that are getting to move. I believe, members, that we can help people get back to work, and we can make those dollars work for us. But if we were to do some of the governor's proposals and eliminate these programs and eliminate those jobs, that I believe, members, we would prolong this recession to a point of a very poor return for California. We need the opportunity to come back, members. We are still the 8th largest economy in the world. There is no excuse for us to not be able to provide for our most vulnerable citizens. And there is, and if we do not be careful with what we are doing, we could make this situation a whole lot worse. You look at the Anderson report from last week, we could make this whole situation a whole lot worse. What this budget proposal tries to do, while revising our budget to bring it into balance, is to say that we are going to try to keep this economy going. Yes, there are one-time solutions in here. I agree. I don't think they're ideal. I can think of a lot of ways that I would vote for to change that dynamic and make them permanent and make this a longer-lasting solution. But at the moment, we are constrained, and we got to hope that this continues to be a one-time economic phenomenon, that by the end of this year, that we can start to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And members, we cannot afford to continue to make this worse by saying to a million other people, whether it's in healthcare or in social services or the most vulnerable in our society, or our teachers, our students, that they don't have a chance and we're letting it all go. We cannot afford to do that, members. I ask for your aye vote today because I think this is about as good as we can do at the moment for a package that deals with a $24 billion problem. This is the heart of it. We can take up all the trailer bills if this bill gets 27 votes. We are ready today to take them all up. Ask for your aye vote.
Senator Dutton.
Well, I was going to hold off. First of all, just a point of order. Are we still in Budget Committee? Are you sure?
Yes.
All right.
We are not, Senator Dutton.
I just don't recall there ever being an adjournment out of Budget Committee. That was all. And going into this session. I wasn't going to really speak a lot until I was told, until the Senator DeCheney mentioned that this is part of the package. And so then, well, let's talk about the package. Like the budget that was passed last February that included the largest tax increase in the state's history, that didn't solve the problem either, and neither does this one. This budget, if you adopt what we're about to go down the road here, what you're going to end up having is something that'll just have to be revisited again, only it'll even be worse next year. Everybody talks about jumping off the cliff. We're already off the cliff. Okay, the landing is what we have to be concerned about. And the only thing that we're doing with this current budget is that we're just accelerating to a faster crash. And the reason why is because a lot of the cuts and everything we're talking about, we do have the federal money that we can use, but without actually putting in the other reforms and everything else necessary to reduce our cost of doing business, that's just going to delay, and it's going to make it even worse. So you're just dragging the pain out. But let's talk about the budget. Or what's being proposed to us as a plan. And first of all, too, also want to point out, now, my colleague, Senator Walters, and I, we attended all the conferences, we attended all the meetings. I basically have had a package of bills that have been geared around trying to figure out ways to stimulate the private sector job market and things like that. Because one of the problems you have, it's great to have CalWorks, but if you don't have any jobs for them to go to, it's not really doing a heck of a lot of good. Okay, so you got to also focus on job creation. But we were in all those meetings. We spoke up. We participated. You see, I thought, based on what Senator Steinberg had said before, that we were trying to engage in a true bipartisan fashion. So I didn't realize it was an either yours or ours. Now, Republicans, and I'll speak for myself now, but I believe a lot of my Republican colleagues, you think we enjoy making cuts? You think we want to see little kids running around without shoes or food or anything like this? You think that most of us who are business people, do you think we want an uneducated workforce? Heck no. We want the same things. But the problem is that the way we've been going about this for the last 6-7 years isn't the right way to do it. Now, I know that one of my colleagues recently set something out by Money Magazine that said that we have all these corporate headquarters here in California. Fact of the matter is, we've only got 2 or 3 of the top 50 in California. But when you also take a look at some of the other organizations and groups out there, we're dead last, people. We don't encourage job creation in the private sector, and you can't sustain an economic growth. And you also are not going to cure the deficit of California if we don't get aggressive in encouraging job growth and creation here in California. But now I want to get back to exactly what this plan that we worked out in the conference committee, I'll give you just some of the main highlights of this proposal. It does solve about $10 billion, maybe 11, right in there someplace, of actual reductions and savings. About $7 billion of that is going to be backfilled from the federal government. But it also does some other things. And frankly, it would make AIG proud in what we got going on here. Because it also includes $2 billion to plan, $2 billion in additional tax increases. It also includes about $4.3 billion in revenue accelerations. That's increasing people's withholding. Let's go ahead and start charging withholding on contractors and the other small independent business operators. It also includes $2.7 billion in fund shifts, which includes a $15 increase in the vehicle license fee and some other things. It also has some different types of fund shifts from areas that frankly are special purpose funds that are supposed to be used for programs that this body passed and the prior governors have signed. They're supposed to be for good public policy reasons. And yet we're taking that money and we're using it for purposes other than what we've told the people that are paying it into those special funds. It also does $2 billion in assumed additional revenue from the sale of state fund, which is questionable. That was a governor's proposal. We didn't like that either. We've got the Medi-Cal reimbursement. That's also depending on either getting a change, waiver from the federal government, or getting some kind of money to come in from them. And then also, to cap it off, it provides for a one-day delay. Actually, I think they said it would go. We would pay everybody at 12:01 on July 1st. Therefore, we could transfer $1.2 billion from this fiscal year to next fiscal year, so that we can actually try to fix. That does not fix the problem. Okay. There was also an additional, billions of dollars of cuts that we were going to propose, not because or that the governor had proposed, not because we agreed with him or liked it, but because we now no longer have any choice. Now, I think my colleagues, Democrats as well as Senator Walters, we did put in the time. We did put in the work. We had dialogue. None of us were bashful. It is the process that we should be going through. I was proud to participate in that process, but the work isn't done. We have scratched the surface. And so I cannot support this or encourage my colleagues to vote for it because it doesn't do the job. We don't have time to wait for tomorrow. We're running out of time. And I'd like to see us get back to work. I'm ready to go back to work. The conference committee has only been recessed. Let's go back and start working on some more stuff.
Senator Alquist is recognized at the desk.
Thank you. I think this has been a very far-reaching discussion, and I'd like to bring it back to what we're voting on today is AB 180, which contains about $11 billion in cuts that we need to do in order to be solvent. We Democrats, both in February and now, have proposed a plan, a courageous plan, a difficult plan. And we're willing to vote on these cuts. And we're wanting to work with our Republican colleagues. Time is running out. It is June 24th. And we have to have this done by June 30th. And unless you, and I say this respectfully because many of you are dear friends on the other side, unless you propose your own plan, it's very easy to cherry pick what you don't like and what we've done. And I want my constituents in Santa Clara County to understand that, no, it's not been easy, but we are really trying to solve this huge deficit, and that is what AB 180 is all about.
Senator Ashburn is recognized at his desk.
Mr. President and Senators, our leader asked a question at the beginning of his remarks about whether this was a game or a drill, or whether it was real. Now, let's see. We have a $24 billion problem, and you offer an $11 billion answer. Does that make it real, or does that make it a game? And then the question was asked, what was the difference between February and today? Well, in February, you said, we need taxes. Taxes are the answer to the problem. So in February, I'm one of those who voted. I never thought I would do it. For taxes, $12.5 billion in taxes, and you say to us now, that's not enough. We want more taxes and more taxes. Mr. and Mrs. California, you're not paying enough in taxes. So that's the difference between February and today, aside from the fact that we had a significant period of time. Let me tell you something else that's different between February and today. In February, we placed before the voters some budget solutions that they rendered a decision upon on May 19. And on May 19, the people of California said, no more taxes, no more borrowing, no more gimmicks. Majority party in Sacramento, do your job. And so you offer to us, Mr. President, a $24 billion problem with an $11 billion answer. This is not what the people asked for on May 19.
Senator Steinberg, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First off, in closing, let me thank the members for engaging here today. I was just handed a press release issued just a few moments ago by our State Controller, John Chung, that begins as follows. Today, State Controller John Chung announced that he will be forced to issue registered warrants, also known as IOUs, beginning July 2nd if immediate budget and cash solutions are not quickly adopted by the governor and the legislature. Now, I appreciate, well, I actually don't appreciate it, the spin here that we're presenting an $11 billion solution. Come on. The conference report is $24 billion. And yes, it includes $2 billion of taxes on Mr. and Mrs. California who happen to smoke and on the oil companies. All right, so let's be clear about it. It's a $24 billion solution. This is the first bill. It's $11 billion in cuts. So I'm not going to let you get away with calling the one bill out of a package of 20 a partial solution. But Senator Cheney's right. If you're not going to vote for the cuts, then what's the point spending the rest of today going through the remainder of the bills? Sometimes people can have differing interpretations of history, but when Senator Onestad says that the reason why so many Republican legislators were willing to, in fact, vote for $6 billion worth of cuts back in February was because, well, that was a small tumor, is I think what I heard. I remember that as a $42 billion deficit, with the state about to go into economic chaos had we not resolved the big problem. Small tumor? We remember history in a very, very different way. The fundamental question here, 7 days from a deadline, is what do you propose to bridge what you call a $24 billion cap? Because remember, no one answered my question. You've rejected $6.2 billion of the governor's plan. The governor's plan. And you've also rejected, that we've adopted, and you've also rejected the Proposition 1A, local government borrowing. Where, how, when, why, and where do you plan to put forward alternatives that will not increase unemployment and further damage California's economy? Because I see it now. Senator Leno mentioned majority vote. This is the only package, the only conference report that has near the number of votes to avoid what the state controller is telling us will be IOUs for Californians on July the 1st. I must say, members, once you get beyond, sort of the trickiness of the argument that we're presenting a partial solution, because it, in fact, is one bill among 20, it's a $24 billion solution. Once you get beyond that, then we're really we are in new uncharted territory. The world is upside down. Democrats are asking Republicans to vote for billions of dollars of cuts. And apparently your answer today is no. So we've had an argument here. Good. I want to assure the people of California that we are prepared to work collaboratively with you, that we are prepared to work with the governor, and I remain confident that we are going to get our job done before this deadline. I urge an aye vote on these measures.
Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Onnested? No. Alquist? Aye. Ashburn? No. Benoit? No. Calderon? Aye. Cedillo? Aye. Cogdill? No. Corbett? Aye. Correa? Cox? No. Denham? No. DeSaulnier? Ducheney? Aye. Dutton? No. Flores?
Aye.
Aye. Hancock? Aye. Harmon? No. Hollingsworth? No. Huff? No. Kehoe? Aye. Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Maldonado? Negrete McLeod? Aye. Oropesa? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Price? Aye. Romero? Aye. Runner? No. Semidian? Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? No. Walters? No. Wiggins? Aye. Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? No. Yee? Yee, no. Correa, no. Mr. President, ayes 22, no 16.
Ayes 22, no 16. Senator Steinberg would like to put the measure on call. Democratic Caucus in the Maddie Lounge. Senator Denham is recognized at his desk.
Mr. President, I rise to take up Budget Bill. Just wanted to get everybody's attention.
You did. Thank you, Senator
Please move
Denham.
AB 322, item number 32, from second reading to the inactive file at the author's request. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Denham. AB 32 moved to the inactive file.
34 on the floor. 35 members on the floor.
Will all members please report to the Senate floor? We're lacking 5 senators. Senator Steinberg, you're recognized at your desk.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to lift the call on Assembly Bill 180, please.
Will the Secretary please lift the call and call the roll?
DeSaulnier, Maldonado,
Ayes 22, no 16. The measure fails. Senator Steinberg notices reconsideration. Without objection, we're going to substitute the roll call. Ayes 40, noes none. The motion is allowed for reconsideration. Senator Steinberg, we do have 2 more items, members, the consent calendar and the special consent calendar. Is any objection for allowing us to utilize unanimous roll call? Seeing, hearing none. Ayes 40, noes 0. The consent and special consent calendars are approved. Senator Steinberg's recognized at his desk.
Thank you. Was that budget bill in the special consent?
It was, Senator Steinberg.
Members, I want to announce session tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to resume work and action on the budget revision. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, Senator Steinberg's announced session tomorrow at 9 a.m. The Senate will be in recess till 3:30, at which time the adjournment motion will be made. We reconvene again tomorrow, Thursday, 9 a.m. here on the Senate floor. The Senate is adjourned.